Daddy put some gravy on his biscuits.
I'm pretty sure he meant biscuits.
And we back. Another episode of Bizcuits and Gravy. A different episode this week. First episode I've ever done solo. Lynn is indisposed at this moment. Lynn had a situation with one of the members of his ministry, and that was way more important than completing this episode for this week. But nonetheless, you got me, your boy Chase, and I'm gonna hold it down. This week's episode was supposed to be something a little off kilter. Every week we have a thought out process about what the topic is going to be, kind of what we're going to talk about. Sometimes there's research done before. There's guests that have been on the show. We do a lot of stuff. It's not a lot of work, but we put a lot of thought into it, what we're going to bring to the table every week. And we have sort of a cadence or a script that we kind of follow loosely because we go off of it all the time. We go over time. We try to keep the shows to a minimum as far as time, and we can hardly ever stick to that. But one of the things we wanted to do with the show is let it be organic and let it flow. We didn't want to come with anything fake or anything that was rigid or anything that people couldn't relate to. So when stuff just goes in a certain direction, it just goes, and we're blessed for that. Nonetheless, like I said, I'm gonna hold it down for me and my boy. The topic for this week was no topic at all, meaning that we decided that we were just going to go for it. No thinking, whatever came up, whatever happened during the week, whatever enlightening experiences we've had with people, things that we've shared with Lynn in the ministry, with me, and whatever has been going on. A lot of life has been happening. I'm studying right now for a lieutenant's exam at our department. Lynn's ministry is up and running. I'm helping him with that. My children, summer's almost here. My daughter had FSA the last few weeks, so a lot of life has been happening. So we've been doing this episode a little bit later in the week, which is a little odd for us. We typically get it done. Typically, we were getting it done earlier in the week, and we'd be set. They'd be already uploaded and ready to air. But right now it's Sunday night. And I just finished watching Game of Thrones, and Daenerys Targaryen lost her mind. Shout out to all my people who watch GOT. But one thing I want to talk about, and I'll give a little bit of a backstory of why it's so important to me. But it's something that I learned and I was experienced and got the first glimpse of last year. And it's come like almost full circle. It's almost been exactly a year, and it's come back to me and hit me again and kind of revamped up with my thinking and in a transition phase of my life. For people who don't know, I was once engaged. I lost my fiance, Radisha Drayton, one of the best people I know. I still love her emphatically. I got a feeling that God's still not done with that yet, but who knows? Who's to say? Anyway, she is a mental health therapist. In fact, she's a clinical director. Well, actually, she's above that now, but she's a licensed clinical social worker. Her license, to my knowledge, yields her the right and regard to do almost any kind of therapy she wants. Her focus is on adolescents, particularly teens, within like the juvenile justice system. I've watched her give everything she's had to this. Literally, like get off on making hardened criminal teenagers break down and cry and become vulnerable. And once she could tap into their vulnerability, she could change their lives. She can almost like wipe the canvas and start to paint a new picture. Being from where I was from and my upbringing and everything and just my ignorance or whatever, I didn't understand or didn't appreciate how much mental health therapy could be beneficial for anyone. I was inclined to believe that it was for the faint of heart or weak people, and my mind has since then been completely changed because I would see her face and I would hear the stories of the sessions that she would have with these boys in these programs, and the boys in the program were people who I knew. They were people who I grew up with, the people who lived in the neighborhood I grew up in, that sold drugs, that had killed people, that had robbed people, that not only did they not really care about your life, they didn't even care about theirs. And to get and reach those people, it's something to this. It's something to this, and it takes special people to really give their all to this, because it takes a lot out of them. So since then, I've been really, really tapped into mental health therapy. I was with her while she studied for her exam to become an LCSW. And one of the things she had to study and learn a lot about was called the DSM. The DSM is a book of pretty much all the signs, symptoms, and everything of most mental health disorders, if not all of them. I know it's updated frequently, and mental health professionals have to revamp and kind of familiarize themselves with the new versions and everything that may have changed or things that I may have added. And I, for one, have always thought that people were too organically different or organically unique to fit any book worth the signs and symptoms so that it would just mask everybody. I always thought that, and I kind of still do. However, I was blessed last year to hear a TED Talk by a woman named Dr. Brené Brown. And it was, I don't know, I never listened to TED Talks too much. I listened to some, and I saw this one, and it like set my whole like world on fire. It made so much sense. This woman worked at AT&T. She left AT&T to go back to school, got her bachelor's degree, master's degree, went on to get her doctorate, and she dedicated the vast majority of her middle age to, I know it's at least 12 plus years, almost 20 years, studying guilt and shame. So much so that the projects and research that she's done has encompassed most of her life. She's written several books, and what she found in her research was so profound, it was so dynamic that it ended up affecting her life personally. She talks about it and opens up, even though it's not her natural nature to do it, about having to go see a therapist, even though she was a therapist, a doctorate level therapist, to get an understanding of what she had found in her research. Because I believe, and I don't know, I've never spoken to her, but she made it seem like what she found was so far beyond what she expected that she couldn't come up with a synopsis or a conclusion to what it all meant. Because especially when it starts to affect her personally, by interviewing all these people, talking to all these people, and people, giving what they thought about shame, guilt, and what it can do to you. And then she found one thing that was common amongst most people, which was vulnerability. And I actually wrote it down. And she talked about, I'll give you what I wrote down in a second, but she talked about the fact that vulnerability is so broad that it's almost the umbrella of everyone's problem. It has something to do with vulnerability, because when she asked people what vulnerability meant to them, she got answers that were so vast and so just different and so it's just all over the place that it was like, this is like the sum total of like almost everything. Because one person would say them being vulnerable is saying I love you first. Another person would say them being vulnerable is initiating intimacy with my wife or with my husband. Another person would say vulnerability to them is having a child or being pregnant after they had a miscarriage. It's so just all over the place. You know what I mean? It was very enlightening. But however, being vulnerable is something that we don't like to do. It is not a good feeling, and she goes on to talk about this. Before I go any deeper, and I'm gonna give you what she came up with vulnerability and why people stray away from it, and what it kills when you stray away from it. She was invited to do a TED Talk on TEDx, and they gave her free reign to do whatever. She talks in her talk about how most people, when she does talks for corporations or events or whatever, they'll kind of streamline on what she wants, what they want her to say, or talk about, or negate and not talk about, especially when they're trying to encourage or incite creativity, and it's to their detriment that they're not letting her just have free reign. They probably do now, but this was prior to the TED Talk. Because she studied shame and guilt. Like, it's, you know what I mean, she's very good at what she does, but I mean, if I'm trying to, like, you know, excite a riot and get everybody riled up to do something positive, shame and guilt might not be the thing I need you to come here talking about. But the TEDx people, they said, go for it. Whatever you do, we love your work. Go for it. Do what you do. And she revamped her approach a little bit, and did it a way that she would not have normally done it. And she was so almost just shocked that she even went and put herself out there like that she was kind of freaked out about it afterwards. She was actually comforted by the fact that she thought nobody would actually listen to it, and then people listened to it. It's one of the most watched TED Talks ever. They invited her back, I believe it's 2 years later, and she did another one 2 years later. I believe it's 2 years. The first one, I think, so it had over 40 million views or something like that, something crazy. So much so that Brené Brown now has a Netflix special about the same topic, an entire Netflix special. She's not a comedian, she's not an actor, she's not an entertainer, nothing like that. It is a mental health therapist who has a Netflix special because this has been so infectious throughout the entire nation, and getting an understanding and grip on this. So vulnerability. She said she came up with and summed it up that some of the reasons why people stray away from being vulnerable is the fear of the unknown. So uncertainty, anxiety, just fear itself, scarcity, and shame are some of the reasons why people will shut down and not put themselves out there to be vulnerable, or pretend to be something that they're really not, because it'll put them in a situation where they're really uncomfortable. She also said one of the biggest things is shame, and she said shame, I'm paraphrasing, but she said she equates shame to being walking into a room that are full of people that you know, that know you well, and then them saying the most hurtful and painful things to you, things that you can't imagine, and then walking out of the room and then having to go back in there and face them again. She equated that to shame, which is very powerful. So these things stop you from reaching out and going for and getting to a place to be vulnerable. But once you decide that you're not going to do that for whatever reason, you kill the birth of love, belonging, and joy, which also comes from vulnerability. Also creativity. Most of the things that have happened in this country, most of the advances that we've had, whether it be socially, technologically, culturally, have been from people who decided to be vulnerable. They could have been wrong. They could have been, people thought they were crazy because it was being so different. They were criticized. They were ostracized. They were all kinds of stuff. And we can even look back at a lot of movements that have happened in our past and movements that are happening now. Me Too movements, Black Lives Matter movements. These are radical things that people are uncomfortable with. And instead of embracing the change, people talk about them, especially people hide behind the internet, hide behind a bunch of different things, the social media outlets or whatever, and say whatever they want. If you can even go back to before we even had social media or the internet, back to civil rights movements and things like that. These were radical things that people were doing. Integration of schools, African Americans going to all white schools, and riots breaking out. People's been injured, killed, and still going. Every day, still going. Dealing with that kind of bigotry and just nasty, just this nasty people, nasty treatment. But it all came from putting themselves out to be vulnerable. It led to some of the greatest things that have ever come to pass in this country. And to think that these things have all happened in the last 70 years or 80 years. Well, we're not even on the brink of a century since some of these things have happened. There are people that are still alive today that bear witness to some of these things. My mother was born in 1955, right in the middle of the civil rights movements. Right when they happened, she was a little girl. So she's alive and well. So she can remember hearing stories. She can remember transition. She can remember being the first of a lot of people in a lot of different areas in the country that was able to actually go to college without having to deal with a lot of the backlash, a lot of the bigotry and racism. And it all came from being vulnerable. I wanted to talk about this because it's been on my mind very heavily. There's a lot of things that we run from, and I think everybody can attest to this, that we run from because we're afraid to be who we are. And it's not, she says, and I agree with this, she says it's not about being who you think you should be, it's actually just being who you are. Her research started, and the kind of idea behind her take on vulnerability came from Teddy Roosevelt in a speech that he gave. And it was one of the things he talked about was like being the man in the arena. And like no matter what happens, you win if you're able to be the man in the arena. I'm not going to give the whole everything she talked about because I can go on and on about it. It's like an hour to an hour and 20 minutes long on Netflix, but I swear you'll be captivated by it. Absolutely captivated by it. You won't be able to turn it off. This is a big deal in our society and our culture. It's a very big deal. This could be the brink of something very special to come, I believe. I actually shared it with some people that I work with when I saw the TED Talk last year, and they found it very enlightening as well. I downloaded 2 of her books, and I'm going to read them, and I'm going to explore them, and I'm going to tie them back into the Word of God like me and Lynn always do. Everything that we do on this show is for the glory of the Lord. Everything. We have a lot of things to come with Bizcuits and Gravy. We want and need people to adhere to the call to action that we have. Share this show with somebody. We want to bring everything that we can to everybody that we can. People that we love, people that we don't know. We're not afraid of nothing. We're not afraid of controversy. We're not afraid of confrontation. We're not afraid to be wrong. We're not afraid to stand up when we're right. We don't care about none of that. The reason why we do this, and then we said it from the beginning, when we do this for free. I had this idea and I sat on it for almost a year. Analysis paralysis, and I talked about that before in another show. And I had a bad case of analysis paralysis, a horrible case. But one day, and I told Lynn about the show, about the idea, and he said that he thought about it. He talked to Shauna, his wife, about it. Shout out to Shauna. It is still Mother's Day, so happy Mother's Day, Shauna. I didn't get to speak to you today. But he talked to his wife about doing a podcast, and I never, put it together that, we would be doing the show together. Almost a year went by. We were at Station 61 in Pompano. I said something about the show, and I said I was going to jump out and put myself out there and be vulnerable, and I was going to do the show by myself. I said, it don't matter who listens, I'm finna do it. Because I've had so many dope conversations with so many dope people. And if we just sat around and record these conversations, so many people could get a lot out of it, get a lot of knowledge out of it. People would have a lot of feedback to give. And I thought that would be a great thing. And then all he said was, I want to do it. That's all he said. And I knew that was it. I knew he'd be dedicated to it, and I'm thankful for that. And I think it's birthed a lot of different things in both of us since we started this show. But the call to action, man, share this show with somebody. The posts that come out, share them on your page, on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. Instagram, wherever you want to share it. Copy it, share it, send it to somebody. The link tree link is on Facebook. Copy that link, send it to everybody you work with. Send it to 10 people. Send it to 10 people. Have them follow the show. People who listen to the show and can access us. We're not this big platform. We hope to be. If God blesses us, we will be. We believing for it. We want to continue this to grow. We had talks in the beginning or whatever. We're going to end up in Oprah's living room doing a show. Dead serious. It's going to happen. But we won't do it without y'all. Right? Take the link. Have people follow the show. People who want to be on the show. People who have expertise. Anything. The genre of the show is society and culture. So it's your show. Whatever you want to be on it, we can talk about whatever. It doesn't necessarily have to be mental health or something that deep. It could be cooking. Matter of fact, Lynn says we got to get her on the show. She's a phenomenal baker. Phenomenal. Right? We need to get her exposure too. Her talent's unbelievable. It's impeccable. All right? And I know this is a shorter show. I'm here as Dolo solo. First time doing it. Might even be a little bit better, being a little shorter, but it is what it is. Man, I'm glad to be here. I'm thankful for life. I'm thankful for everybody who listens to us. I love it. For the glory of the Lord. Bizcuits and Gravy. We'll see y'all next week.